Great to have you guys here. It was a wonderful film, and the CLEO Institute is so happy to have Melissa Troutman and Joshua Prabanik here with us to talk about the film. And everyone who's on right now, please do feel free to enter in comments or questions that you may have about the film into the comment section on YouTube. That should be showing up underneath the actual screening information on the screening page. But if for any reason you have trouble with that, please do go to the YouTube link for the actual live stream of the Q&A that I put in the follow-up video for people who signed up for the event. But yes, really, really happy to have Joshua and Melissa. And CLEO Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we focus on climate education and climate advocacy. We have several different ways that we do that. We have a Gen CLEO portion of the organization that allows youth to get involved and helps them to work with their representatives and tell them what it is that the kinds of actions they want them to take. So we help them to make advocacy easy for them and accessible for them. We also have some climate speakers network trainings that we do. And we teach people how to give presentations, and we also do some teacher training as well. Also, I wanted to let everyone know that since we are a 501c3, we can't make any actual recommendations about how you vote on any of these issues. We wanted to share this film about the rights of nature with you tonight because rights of nature is currently on the ballot in Orange County, Florida. It's Charter Amendment 1. And we thought it would be good to talk about what that actually means while not telling you how to vote. Okay, so Joshua Prabanik is a film director, an editor, investigative reporter, and he founded the Public Herald with Melissa Troutman. And Melissa Troutman is a writer, editor, film producer, and director, and vocal artist from Cloudersport, Pennsylvania. And so they both co-directed and co-produced this really beautiful and important film, and also worked together at Public Herald. So I would love to get a little bit more background information about how you guys started working together and the work that you do at Public Herald. And then I want to really dig into the film a bit more as well. Whoever would like to start.
That's you, Melissa. Go for it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
So excited to hear about what's happening in Florida. You know, y'all down there on the forefront of a growing movement across the world. And that's a really cool place to be, a really important place to be. Joshua and I got our start together in 2011. I was covering fracking in Potter County, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and where Josh's family has been fly fishing for years. And he reached out interested in how that was impacting water, or potentially impacting water in Potter County, because Potter County is home to the most exceptional value and high quality, the most pristine water in the state, specially designated. And so the assumption he had was, well, the most pristine and protected streams will be the most protected streams from fracking. And so as a journalist from Ohio looking at the potential for fracking coming into Ohio, he reached out and we started chatting, and I told him what I had learned as a local reporter. I was working for the local paper at the time, about the impacts to water from fracking. And then he asked if I wanted to really dig into it more. And so we started that. We started Public Herald in 2011, which is an investigative news nonprofit dedicated to the public interest. We are also we're a very small nonprofit, very passionate and tiny group of rotating artists and journalists who have predominantly focused on exposing the cover-up of water contamination related to industrial development in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and in the Northeast. And what we, after years and years and years of investigation, we in 2017 released a major report that detailed how the state, detailed the ways by which the state covers up water contamination from fracking development in particular. And that has now that has become an investigation by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, and criminal charges have been filed by several gas companies or fracking companies in Pennsylvania. So that's how we got our start. And then Josh, do you want to share how we got to the film from all of that?
Sure. Yeah, if you want me to jump in on that. Thanks, Arya, for having us, and for the CLEO Institute for hosting us. The way that Public Herald got into rights of nature was a couple things. I had been following rights of nature and been doing work in regards to that sort of clandestine work in Ohio early in like 2006, 7, and 8. Mostly with regards to regenerative agriculture, permaculture, local food economies, that kind of thing. And it got on our radar because basically when folks were having problems with fracking in Pennsylvania and across the country, strangely enough, they started to come up with solutions that dealt with giving rights to nature rather than just banning fracking specifically. They were actually banning fracking and creating rights of nature also. And that was the doorway for us to say, holy shit, we have a chance to actually tell this story about rights of nature, which we're enthralled with. And Melissa got in touch with Grant Township, and she started to write that story. I think I was out of state at the time. And they put together a really good story about Grant Township and what happened there. And then we immediately, you see in the film, like that big meeting that's happening in Grant. And that was like when I got back and, we were able to go there. The DEP held this meeting, and then all of a sudden, a town that has half a dozen people at a public meeting ended up having, over 100. So it was a big issue, and it's one that caught the attention of the mainstream public pretty quickly. I mean, I know that story that we published blew up. It got Rolling Stone involved. Rolling Stone writer read it, immediately started to draft the story, which Rolling Stone approved, and then they published that. And then as we were producing this film, we're dealing with the rights of nature concept, which nobody's familiar with. So hardly anybody we can talk to about it. We really wanted to have capitalism at the forefront because we feel like, this is probably one of my own economic theories, that the invisible hand itself has been transformed because of climate change and because of what we've done to this planet. So you can no longer just, go out and create as much money as you want and have that trickle down to the rest of the economy, because the resources aren't there for you to do that. You can't be a farmer in the Midwest and just suck all the water you want out of the Ogallala Aquifer and farm your land. Because there's not going to be any water left. So those farmers have to work cooperatively to try and figure out how to grow crops. And that is not a capitalistic economy based on Adam Smith's definition of the invisible hand. That's an entirely new thing, which the film, implicitly, in some ways explicitly points to, which is that nature is now calling the shots in certain cases in regards to the economy and mandating what needs to happen. And that's happening, of course, globally. And that's a economic enlightenment that, it's not being taught in schools yet, but it's certainly a reality that's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And then as we're doing the film, it was like rights of nature case, rights of nature case, new rights of nature cases all across the world. So we really got to take, you know, our usual approach, which is a hyper local focus on a statewide issue with hardcore investigative journalism, and then attach it to a global story. And that's kind of how we ended up finishing and getting the film done.
It's an interesting concept. I mean, I love the title of the film being Invisible Hand. I had never heard that term be used before as that kind of faith in our capitalistic system. And so it's a really, you know, rich dialogue to have about where we put our faith, and the, you know, the rights of nature, focusing on how we cannot ignore the rules and the laws of nature in giving more faith toward a, you know, legislative system that is man-made and self-created, as opposed to the laws that already existed before we were here. So I just, you know, just saying that in appreciation for that concept and the deeper kind of discussion points behind it is really beautiful and extremely relevant right now. So also, I wanted to touch a little bit more. I think, you know, the term of fracking has come up in the presidential debates, of course, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people really understand inherently what it is, unless they've really been out there. You know, in the Northeast, it's more well known because so much has happened in Pennsylvania, and you guys have been there for it. So I was just wondering if you could also give a little bit more of a background about what fracking is, and hold on a second. And is it possible to have safe fracking? Because that's also a discussion. That's something people talk about. Oh, it's okay, we're going to do it, but it's going to be safe. So is that a thing?
Well, you want to go or you want me to go?
I'm trying to think of a good analogy, like safe fracking.
That's not a thing.
Fracking is safe.
It's not even up for
I know, but
debate.
I was trying to come up with a clever, like, if fracking, if there's a safe way to, saying there's a safe way to frack is like saying there's a safe way to wrap your child in saran wrap or something, you know, like,
like a safe way to smoke cigarettes. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, like smoke. Yeah, that's a good one. Smoking cigarettes doesn't give everyone lung cancer.
Safe way, yeah. Safe way to
but it's also not, you can't say to a person smoking a cigarette, that is so safe.
Yeah, and this isn't like we're not
safe way. It's not,
and that's not a hypothetical answer from us. I mean, we have the largest database of evidence in regards to water pollution related to fracking, the largest database that exists online, published by Public Herald, which shows all of the water contamination investigations in Pennsylvania. You know, you're looking at like 10,000 investigations that happened, something that was severely suppressed by the state, which has resulted in, you know, this criminal investigation that exists right now. And, you know, I say mostly to pro-fracking and anti-fracking people who talk to us about it that, you know, if the well is in your area, you're going to be rolling the dice on the impact to your health and to your land and to your water. But, you know, as you know, in a casino, you're going to lose at some point if you keep rolling that dice. So that's the situation that people are in, and you can expect X amount of percentage of harm to exist next to a fracking well, no matter what. It's just a matter of if you're going to be in that line of fire in that red zone.
Yeah, so there are many, many studies. I mean, hundreds of studies that detail the risks that go along with rolling those die. But for anybody who just doesn't know what fracking is at all, fracking is a way to mine natural gas from deep down in the earth using a lot of pressure from explosives and a lot of toxic chemicals that the industry does not have to tell us about. The same kinds of chemicals that if you or I put them down underground through groundwater aquifers, we would go to jail, but the industry does not, because they have legal loopholes that allow them to do this. And so it's a method for extracting natural gas. It was sold to us as a way to provide the United States with energy independence, right? And if there is a plus side to fracking, it's that we are much more familiar now with the true costs of fossil fuels, because they're in our backyard now, and they're not just coming from, Texas and Saudi Arabia. Like, it touches more of us, and so more of us are aware. But it's not about energy independence either, because they're building export terminals to ship it overseas. So it's a way for oil and gas companies to make more oil and gas money during the age of climate change.
Yeah. So to bring that back home a bit as well, is that the city of Orlando has a coal-fired power plant that they just recently made an announcement that they were going to close. But the announcement also included that they're going to be replacing it with natural gas. Mm-hmm. So it's really important, I think, to understand the entire line that, because we look at natural gas, people say, oh, okay, it doesn't have as much of an impact because it doesn't have as many pollutants coming out of it when it's being burned at the specific site where it's being burned. But of course, there's a much longer path of getting it to that point that also has some extreme impact. So it's interesting when you guys talk about, protecting the waterways up in Pennsylvania, for instance. How is that going to affect us down here?
Yeah.
What are the connectivities to that?
That kind of narrative shouldn't be allowed in a public discussion or in a newspaper publishing stories about the impacts of these facilities. The narrative should be clear that that specific facility, let's just say that it requires 1,000 wells in order to generate enough gas to keep it going. Then you can expect to have 1,000 impacted water supplies in Pennsylvania to exist. So there's going to be 1,000 aquifers or river systems or something that are going to be knocked out and have pollution introduced to them as a result of building that facility. And then you go into the rest of the cradle to grave for the fracking industry. So there's going to be X millions of tons of radioactive waste extracted out of that ground, placed into a landfill, which we've reported on. And that radioactive leachate will find its way to a sewage plant, find its way to a river, much like you're dealing with in Florida right now with your ballot issue that exists there. And just like in Florida, communities in Pennsylvania need to be taking this same kind of action and this same kind of energy and applying it locally and passing these sorts of ballot initiatives where they state that we will not allow for this pollution to exist in our waterways, and our waterways have a right, to be free of this pollution, and they have a right for the biodiversity to thrive. And I think that that's, just part of the narrative that has to exist. It's like, how much biodiversity do you get to knock out when you build these power plants? Because it's not just the power plant itself. There's an attachment, a ring of attachment of infrastructure that exists around that has to be equated into the permitting process of those facilities. You have to take the cradle to grave life cycle of all these industries and the attachments that they have to send the energy to them. It cannot be these, these very isolated permits for something that the only thing that matters is what comes out of the smokestack at that place. So.
Right. So what we're talking about is the isolated, compartmentalized look at harm. So we're going to switch from coal to natural gas because X, Y, and Z are better. But you're ignoring the rest of the alphabet, And it's the same way when we think about, okay, well, but how does fracking in Pennsylvania affect us in Florida? It affects us all because everything is connected. Climate change is just the latest symptom of this cultural problem we have of not looking at things as connected, not seeing things as they are, which is connected, and not addressing life and our decision making in a holistic way. So, and we do it a lot of ways, and we have a big learning curve for a lot of us to do it a different way, to do it in a way that is inside the boundaries of nature and recognizes that everything is connected, and climate change is proof that everything is connected. It's the latest problem. It's also the largest problem facing the human race. Why is it a global problem? If the US is the most polluting nation on earth, why is it not just affecting the United States? Because we live in a global ecosystem. The living entity upon which we live is connected to us all. And so what happens 1,000 miles away can affect, islands in the Pacific. So.
Right. And just when we're focused on protecting our waterways, we're also having that impact on climate, because so many of the same industries that are polluting into our waterways, that are having that, very visible effect in terms of killing the animals around those areas and having that negative impact on the people who get cancer and sick in the area. Those same industries are also polluting into the sky and creating, methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases that we have. It's way worse than carbon dioxide in many, many ways. But we don't notice it. We don't pay attention to it in the same way that carbon dioxide has become famous as being this horrible greenhouse gas, because it was so much more prevalent for so long. But then we've switched to natural gas. And so now we have an increased problem with methane, because that's all connected, part of the same thing.
By the way, Ari, I wanted to mention, there are power plants projects up here in the Northeast that have of switching from coal to natural gas, or it's either that or the switching of power, or some of the proposals have been for brand new plants to run on natural gas, and quite a few of those projects have been shuttered because it is now cheaper for them to go straight to wind and solar, or a combination of renewables. We're at the price point now where the market itself has made it so that it makes more sense to go right to renewables rather than through natural gas to get there. So
definitely. Excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up. So we have a question as well from Scott Lewis. How did you decide to make Native Americans such an essential part of the film? And was it hard to get their involvement?
Well, it was a challenge to get a Native American community to speak directly about rights of nature, because it wasn't a concept that was introduced at the time of the film when we started to reach out to like the Blackfeet and the Ho-Chunk and some others out west. When we interviewed them in Wisconsin and Oklahoma, which you don't see in the film, it was like 2014, and rights of nature had not been brought into their culture as a Western legal system and Western legal answer to problems they were facing. However, rights of nature is inherent within their society and within their politics and within their culture, as some usually referred to, in terms of like something being sacred, or or other references to nature along those lines. That's the kind of rights of nature language we would expect to see in the Western legal system, which is inherent within their society and within their culture. And then with the Defend Ohio fight, that introduced rights of nature into the Seneca Nation of Indians, and Dega Winondas was kind of full throttle with trying to incorporate, this Western ideology of rights of nature into the Haudenosaunee prophecy. So it was just a matter of us talking to Dega and getting, his permission to share their story and their culture in that way. And it was the most difficult thing was just for us to, I think, do it in a way that honored and respected, their traditions and their relatives, and made sure that it was clear in the film that it's not simply rights of nature versus capitalism. There's an entire world of rights of nature within the indigenous nation, which is why we open the film with their voice, and we close the film with their voice. So
yeah, we usually, and I didn't do it this time, maybe because
tech problems got me too, Melissa.
Problems at the beginning, but we usually start by saying where we are physically in the world. And where I am in Potter County, Pennsylvania, the Haudenosaunee and Susquehannock people were stewards of this land long before my ancestors arrived here. And the indigenous culture, the indigenous way of life that was almost eradicated from this land and was part of the land. It was not separate, very connected. That is the knowledge base that we're missing. Living life in relationship with nature in a way that honors nature and just very practically speaking, lives within the bounds of nature. So it was always a sort of like duh thing. Like the rights of nature is the Western, like the way to try to fill a massive gaping hole in the Western's like civilized white culture that was eradicated when we got here. So it's in a way, it's a getting back to, trying to get back to indigenous knowledge and indigenous ways and folk ways that by trying to, but also dealing with the system that we have, which so that's why rights of nature has become in a big way a very legal approach, which in some ways I think is great. We didn't get into this in the film, but I think that can also be it's definitely very difficult to, and legitimizes our current system of law in a way. But anyway, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a problem with our descriptions of rights of nature and our language barriers with people of indigenous descent, because they don't have a language which automatically terms nature as property or automatically terms nature as this inanimate object, calling it, and referring to it like that, that's not how they would speak, that it deserves rights. It would be more like our relatives deserve rights. Or there was a really great podcast where this indigenous woman was saying that she's trying to replace that word with something like key or kin, which key was a version of kin, your ancestors. So saying like, kin deserves rights, meaning nature. That kind of language of automatically granting personhood in the words to nature, I think is a really powerful and important transformation that, we'll definitely start including in our films more and in our writing more at Public Herald.
It's interesting to me because we have not been taught. We've been taught something entirely different in Western culture. I mean, consumerism and the advertisements that we see that encourage us to place worth or success on how much we have is very much disconnected from that. And then also what you guys bring up in the film is how our legal system inherently, in the Constitution, I thought it was very interesting that you said corporations don't exist in the Constitution, yet we've given personhood to corporations. And we don't have any other way to equalize that right now. So it seems as if it's just a way to equalize that within our legal structure, because our legal structure is so much,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that this community was trying to protect the waterways and protect themselves, but that they were sued and had to try to change the legislation to reflect that so many times was incredibly striking, I thought. So I think it just says so much to how much our society is not set up to protect something that is so inherently thought to be just about everything. It's the way you live and exist. For the Native American culture, I imagine it sounds like that's what you're basically speaking to. So they don't have a separate word for it because it's everything.
You don't need to grant rights to nature when you live in harmony with nature already.
Yeah, and that's essentially, the core of their culture. I mean, it might not be represented in some of the, modern day assimilations that they've had to deal with, and what they've had to face with basically losing their food sources. I was doing a couple of these Q&As out in North Dakota in the last few weeks and just realizing how much of their grass plains have been annihilated, and how, the normal migration and herds of animals can't exist there because there is no space, there's no lane of biodiversity for them to walk through. It's all, a very, very homogenized and monoculture landscape that we've stripped from that place. And I think, that concept needs to be really hammered in with these rights of nature ordinances and these rights of nature bills, because it's missing from most of the bills that have been passed worldwide. And what's missing is the specifics. I know Melissa and I just talked about this, is that, after reviewing these documents, the things that we're not seeing are the very specific rights for nature. Like it's as if we've passed and we've created bills that say, human rights have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and then that's the end of it. And the rights of nature bills are kind of similar. It's like the river has a right to exist and flourish and be happy, and it's kind of free from pollution, and that's the end of it. But that's not the strength of human rights. The strength of human rights really comes in, freedom of speech, for instance. So that kind of specific language really needs to get into these bills, and I'm sure that communities will eventually do that, because we're in the infant stages here of communities passing these bills. But basically the discussion has to be, what do we equate freedom of speech to within a rights of nature bill? And for me, it's like we would find freedom of biodiversity, the freedom of biodiversity to exist as a core feature universally for rights of nature internationally seems an essential part of the specific laws that need to be brought into and discussed in a courtroom that communities don't have inside of the bills right now. But I certainly hope that, as this grows and matures, that kind of language gets included.
That's definitely a critique that I've heard about rights of nature bills as well, that they think that the language is too broad. So it sounds like if you were to expand it in that way, that would hopefully that would actually help address some of the issues that.
Sure, I would hope so too. I mean, freedom of biodiversity isn't too extreme. It's like, you at least have to create the spaces in your community for biodiversity to exist. And I think any kind of environmental assessment of a county or an area would be able to figure that out. I mean, they might have to go and strip out the county lines and work on actual biological boundaries. That would be great if we could just start with watersheds and biological boundaries rather than county lines themselves, and just figure out, what biodiversity looks like in that space that also includes humans, given what we've done to it. I mean, there's a lot to, the farmers, for instance, we could have a situation where farmers could gain tremendously with rights of nature. There could be prairie strips or riparian zones that exist in those areas. And those prairie strips and those riparian zones could be part of a program where, a farmer is paid X amount of money because they've secured 20 to 30% of their land for biodiversity. And, that connects from farm to farm. They could be paid through, hunting programs where hunting licenses exist for hunters to walk through that space, and be able to forage and hunt or fish in those spaces. And those kickbacks for licenses, hunting licenses, fishing licenses, could go directly to these farmers, and they could be making more money through biodiversity than they do through actually growing crops. So I think there's a lot of options there that could be explored for communities in expanding biodiversity, like within their area, to make sure that, these rivers aren't being polluted, which is what the bill is asking for in Florida right now.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Melissa?
Just kind of, to add on to that a little bit. I mean, for me, as a writer who's been studying and been watching the rights of nature movement for a while now, and as a former educator, and maybe this will probably resonate with you guys at the CLEO Institute because you are also educators. But when I look at the rights of nature movement, I see predominantly people passing resolutions and legal charters. And that's amazing. What I don't see are educational programs around the rights of nature, or just around the rights of nature idea, in order to talk about and build out what it means to live within the laws of nature.
Except for your film.
Well, but no, we didn't make a film that creates the vision of the world if the rights of nature were a thing.
You're right.
Or if indigenous knowledge was never destroyed. Like we don't have that story yet. We don't have that vision. We don't have, when I was a teacher, we call it scaffolding. In order to get from the current knowledge level to where we need to go, we need to have steps of how do we get there. We don't have those steps. We have statements of belief on paper, and that is like I said, that's very important. But what we don't have are discussions about practical cultural change. How do we live in a manner that allows nature to exist, thrive, and flourish? How do we do that? And that's what I'm really excited to see in bubbling in this movement. I know there are already people out there doing this. On our website, invisiblehandfilm.com, we have an action page with a list of organizations, movement rights, Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, and many others who are doing educational work around rights of nature, earth jurisprudence. The Center for Earth Jurisprudence is in Florida. But I feel like people get really excited about passing a local charter, but they're not excited yet about getting a rights of nature curriculum in their schools, and I'm excited to see that next level happen eventually, because the more people, in order to win campaigns for the rights of nature, people have to understand it. They have to have the story of they have to have the story of nature. They have to have a relationship with nature. And the more that we can build that culture, the more charters are going to pass, and the more the movement's just going to grow and grow and grow. And the more it grows on the ground, it just starts to lift itself up. And then maybe we have our own national rights of nature and our own national constitution. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love speaking about the culture, because I think that's key to everything that we've been working for, really, because what we discussed earlier about how our society is just not built for that. We didn't grow up learning these things necessarily. I mean, maybe in little pieces we get a little bit of this or that, and growing up and learning to love nature to begin with is very profound, and creates the groundwork for it. But we don't understand the connectivity behind the things that we do. We go to the grocery store. We don't know the impacts of our cultural dependencies. So it's the whole Buckminster Fuller thing as well, of building that other reality, essentially, as opposed to just going, no, this is bad. What do we build? Exactly. I've got another comment from someone, from Laz Herrera. They say, I found the Milton Friedman clips interesting and helpful to put these events and ideas into perspective. Was that Adam Smith talking about the morality censors?
I'm not sure about the morality censors. I mean, I know that there's, that Adam Smith has in his writing, this idea that, the morality of the local community will be able to prevent something like the situation we're facing right now, which is, basically like the trust and relationships in a local community will not allow these more evil corporations to come in and take over your local commerce, because you'll instead spend your dollar locally, with those people, because that's the right thing to do. And as we all know, that morality theory is basically bullshit. And human nature doesn't really work that way when it comes to capitalism, because capitalism demands that you have more money. And in order for you to have more money, you need to spend less. So you're, in most cases, going to be taking the cheaper option, not really understanding the effect it has on your local business owners and the relationship with those people. So there's a lot of morality fantasies, if you want to call them that, within Friedman's writing and within Adam Smith's writing about how human nature plays out in the economy. The idea that you're going to have the best of all possible worlds if you have a competitive market, because the most sought after and the best produced product will win at the end of the day. And that's just not the way this works. It's the cheapest product that wins. It's the most scandalous product that wins. It's actually like the complete reverse of what these guys thought. And the marketing sales pitch, that they made worldwide through the Chicago school in the 60s and 70s and all that kind of stuff. So, universities should be more clear about that. That they attack Karl Marx for the utopian fantasies that book tries to play out with communism. and they should attack any free market book on the same level. It has the same kind of utopian fantasies that something like communism does. And I truly don't think that we're going to be moving into an economy like socialism or like communism or like capitalism. I think that the new economy that'll exist will be one that follows the laws of nature, will be one that includes the rights of nature. And the name of that economy and the name of the government that runs that economy does not exist right now. But I think that, that is where we will ultimately be going. And it will either be that or just, the darkest corner.
Joshua?
I think you froze, Joshua. If you
can hear.
The darkest.
Oh no, I didn't.
No, not at that moment.
Okay, keep waiting for him to unfreeze, but I don't know. Maybe he'll.
While he's frozen, if folks are interested in like post-capitalist economies, one interesting economic model that's has a lot of discussion and research done around already is the circular economy, which is which has a goal where regeneration is a key tenet and a key goal, which is missing from, nature is part of the whole decision-making process in circular economies. So I'm not saying we're going to become a circulist nation and have a circularism economy someday, but it's, it might be an interesting starting point for folks who are like, well, what is there besides capitalism,
Yeah. I mean, there are at least attempts going in that direction. Just the concept of using everything, reusing things, not just throwing things out. How can you use the scrap metal in the toaster that no longer works and repurpose it? And, it just makes people think a little bit harder about what they throw out and how they utilize it. But it's absolutely, it can save money as well when we're not having to reproduce everything from the starting point, right?
Yeah, and the moral of our human story is nature's in charge here. And so we have got to start learning how to live like that is true. Or nature's just gonna like slap us down and be like, yeah, well, you didn't learn that in time, did you? So we can either, after our premiere, Mark Ruffalo said it very well. He said, we can either change with honor and with respect for each other in the natural world. We can do it with grace, or we can be dragged into it by necessity. And if we choose the latter, many, many, many more people are going to fall on very hard times, and they're going to die.
You're right.
So which one are we going to do? And when I say we, I know that, those of us in this circle right now in this space probably already get all of this. And we have to live in a world with a lot of people who don't. And that's one of the challenges. How do you change a culture which includes many, many people who just will not change? And that brings me back to education again, like not in an indoctrinating sort of way, but actually if we could stop indoctrinating youth with this fantasy that we can live outside the boundaries of nature, that would be great. Because what better way to make cultural change than to start with the next generation from the beginning? So by the time they're adults, they don't have these crazy ideas in their head.
You're trying to kill the American dream, Melissa.
Hey, let's wake up. Let's wake up from the American dream and live our best American actual life. How about that?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Live our best lives and not just.
We're gonna kill your live stream next on YouTube.
Well, we just have a few minutes left, so I think we need to start wrapping things up, unfortunately. I loved talking with you guys. Really loved the film, and I'm also looking forward to learning more about the other films. I know that you guys have a couple others under your belt. If you want to tell us a little bit about those before we call it a night.
Oh, yeah, I think, am I still on?
You are.
Oh.
Except you started that with like, Tell them about Triple Divide, Josh.
Oh yeah, we could talk about those. I was going to say that with regards to that, economic stuff, I think it's helpful if folks just try with the film. We're really trying to get you to reimagine, the foundation of the way you think and the foundation of what we're told, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're just dealing with, like the biggest concepts, right? Like democracy, capitalism, rights of nature, human rights, these concepts that we handle every day, from the core, like what is the core of that? And I think it's really important, especially when Melissa talked about education, which, I think she's 100% right on making sure there's an educational program that exists. There should be colleges with rights of nature courses, programs, living within, and I don't mean sustainability, sustainability and even permaculture, in many cases, can be a very anthropocentric study. And I think that's the deal, the thing you have to remember with economy is that we're not moving into another anthropocentric economy with rights of nature. It's an ecocentric place. So, nature is the foundation of those decisions, which includes all of us, rather than human interest, self-interest, things along those lines. So I just wanted to share that and bring that up, because I think thinking about it in terms of what's anthropocentric and what's ecocentric is a good way to tackle, ideas and things that you're being told, and understand, like, is this really a rights of nature story that I'm sharing, or is this another, anthropocentric story that I'm talking about? And that's the same thing with writing bills. Go ahead.
What's that?
Same thing with writing bills. Is the bill specifically anthropocentric? Is it about humans and humans' rights to clean water, or is it specifically about nature's rights to clean water? Because if it's nature's rights to clean water, it includes everything. It shouldn't have to say and separate humans from that. We should all be a part of that definition of nature under any legal mandate that exists.
Yeah, we have to find a way to reach people too. And so unfortunately, I think that sometimes that how do you say it? I can't say
Anthropocentric.
Anthropocentric focus,
Yeah.
Gets people to pay attention and care about it, because we have not been taught to care about things from that nature-centric focus, unfortunately.
Well, we do have two other films. We have Triple Divide, which is our first film on fracking, which Melissa and I finished in 2013. And we've had a lot of great success with that film, and it's been distributed worldwide, and we're really, really happy with what came out of that. And we did it quickly. We did it in 18 months. This film was 6 years of work, trying to get to merge these storylines together and find out if they bridged or not. But with Triple Divide, it was done in 2013. We did Triple Divide Redacted in 2017. That basically deals with the hardcore evidence that the first film didn't have established. The first film dealt with very individual cases of water contamination, very close relationships to that story. Many of those stories were still, happening. They weren't finished. So Triple Divide Redacted is like the nail in the coffin. It's like, this is how these stories ended. This is how the EPA manipulated their national study. this is how the state buried these cases. This is the situation now. It's an update essentially from that film. And I know
a call for a criminal investigation.
And a call. Yeah, we call for a criminal investigation. Yeah.
Which happened.
Which did happen.
Which happened, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. At the state level in Pennsylvania, there was a criminal investigation of the fracking industry by our Attorney General Josh Shapiro's office.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Good for you. No, you guys are doing amazing work. I can't wait to see Triple Divide Redacted. Might as well go straight to that one first, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you both so much for being here with me and sharing your film. Really, really beautiful. I love how you interwove the story with the canoe down the river, and it was just really, really beautiful. And also, I just want to let everyone know that please do feel free to make a donation. The CLEO Institute, we want to be able to continue bringing things like this to you and continue with our education. So please do make a donation right here on the page. You should have a link to that. And we have a climate and health symposium coming up as well. And it's an Empowering Capable Climate Communicators Symposium. And we have tickets to that on our website. So please do check it out, cleoinstitute.org/events. And you can check out all of our events coming up, and please do sign up, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks, Aria.
Okay, thank you. Bye.